How you doing?
Good. Thank you for having me today.
Thank you for coming out to Jersey. I know it's not the favorite of places for New Yorkers, but I appreciate you coming out. For people who may not be familiar with yourself, if you just want to give like a quick introduction.
Yeah. So my name's Paula. I was a member of the University of Pennsylvania women's swim team, where obviously many people are very familiar with this now, but a man who was a member of the men's team decided he wanted to identify as a woman and join the women's team. My team was then told we had to accept it. We were silenced. We were told we were hateful and bigots if we ever spoke out against it.
Mhm.
Obviously, I couldn't stay quiet. And so I started talking about the issue. And so I've sort of been put into this world of talking about women's sports and women's rights and a bunch of other things, sort of changing the trajectory of my life, actually. I studied engineering undergrad. So I was
Okay.
never expecting to be a vocal advocate for any issue really at all. And so that's sort of the short summary of how I got here.
No, that's fascinating. You know, you never know where life is going to push you towards.
Yeah.
I'm sitting here for various reasons, and I have a IT background, so I completely understand where you don't expect to end up somewhere. You're on a different trajectory. But we got sushi.
We did. It's good. Yeah, and I appreciate you having me out here. I think there's just so many cool people and amazing people I've gotten to meet.
Mhm.
And so obviously when we got in touch sort of through Jen and XXXY, I was really excited to just be in touch with, again, people with different stories, different backgrounds, different life experiences than myself, and people I never would have met if things hadn't happened to me
Oh
the
yeah.
way that they did. So there's so many people like that fall into that boat. And so you're definitely one of them.
Yeah, it's definitely weird. Like, I could say the most interesting thing. So I met Rudy Giuliani. Well, I haven't met him in person. I was on his podcast, but he liked my book. And so for like, you understand, I had zero expectations when I wrote my book.
Hmm.
And so for Rudy Giuliani to be like, hey, I was reading your book, I like it. And he was talking about certain points. And he wasn't just saying it, like he actually was reading it. Was definitely weird. I met Dr. Oz.
Okay.
And sent him a copy of the book. I just met some interesting people that I've never imagined running into. So you never know, these different blessings that
Yeah,
are
definitely.
that are brought to you.
That's yeah, that's so random. Rudy Giuliani. Dr. Oz, I remember when he was running for Senate in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I wasn't even necessarily in support of him running for that seat. I was actually more so in support of Kathy Barnett, who hopefully I can have her on Breaking Bread
Yeah.
sometime soon. But I was on her podcast. Um, so it's always interesting, like here are these former
Yeah.
candidates, and I ran into both of them just by chance. Um, but enough about me. I wanted to know a little bit more as far as your experience as far as being on that particular team. So if I remember correctly, because my mind
Yeah,
may be
you're
off,
good.
Leah used to be, what was his?
William or
William.
Will.
Will.
Yeah,
And was he part of the male swim team?
for 3 years.
Okay.
Yeah, and so interestingly, actually, the first time I ever met him, I was in high school. I was 17 years old, and I was on my official visit at the University of Pennsylvania.
Mm.
And funny enough, he happened to also be hosting a male recruit that weekend. And so the way that it works is you come and pick up your recruit from the office, right? And you have to host a child in high school
Mhm.
for the weekend, and try to sell them on the school. You want them to come swim at your school. And so he was hosting someone, and my host was still on her way. And so he was actually one of the first people I think I met on the team because he happened to be again in the office picking up his recruit.
Mm.
And so that was the first time I ever met him. Um, Again, member of the men's team, totally normal man. My freshman year, he was a full-fledged member of the men's team. There was no talk of anything. In the beginning of my sophomore year, we had a team meeting. And this was like very early, beginning of September of 2019 at this point. And the men's team have a meeting and they finish, and all the men leave. They don't say a word to us. They go into their locker room, they get ready for practice. All of us women are still in waiting for our meeting, and our coach just lets Will hang back there and says, Will, this is actually your meeting. And it looks at him and just says, okay. And I'm like, why is a member of the men's team about to lead a women's team meeting? And it was in under 30 seconds. He looks at all of us and just says, hey guys, I just want to let you know I'm transgender. I'll be transitioning to your team next season. Please refer to me now as she, her pronouns. And that was the entire conversation. And you're laughing. I started to laugh a little bit. I was like choking back laughter because I was like, this is not a real thing that's happening. And I'm sitting towards the front of the room and I look behind and I see none of my teammates are laughing. They're all very serious. They're like, oh, clapping. They're like, we're so proud of you. And I said, wait a minute, is this real? So anyway, my mind is spinning. I can't stop thinking about it. We start practice. I'm still thinking about it. That night I go to dinner with some of my friends who aren't on the swim team. And quite literally, it was all I could talk about at dinner. And everybody's like, Paula, stop. You're so annoying. This is not real. I'm texting my family. I'm texting my brother. I'm talking to my friends that are pre-med at dinner. You know, like it's just, I just couldn't wrap my mind around it. And so then that night, and I actually have a screenshot on my phone still that I found the other day. And I sent it to Riley Gaines, who obviously, you know, good friend of mine and big fighter on this issue. I went online and I screenshotted the NCAA policy handbook that allowed this to happen. And it literally just says, you know, if basically it's this whole handbook of if you identify as a woman, you just 1 year sit off your men's team or do your hormone suppressant and then you're good to go. And the rest of the handbook is just saying that people are happier if they get to compete on women's teams. And it's just stories of people who are happier the way that they are. So that was really how the whole thing started, it's been over 5 years now, actually, since I first heard, you know, that this is going to happen. So
time flies.
It's definitely been a long journey. Yeah.
See, I guess for me, I'm much more into the mindset of people and their behavior. And I'm very curious, is there a difference between William and Lia?
Yes. So that's so funny you say that. In my opinion, it really truly was like Will Thomas didn't exist anymore and Lia was reborn and was a completely different person. On the men's team, Will was very hardworking, very quiet, very keep to himself. Truly, like I didn't really know. I had never really talked to him very much when he was on the men's team. But he was always, you know, at practice, always at the pool, always doing what he needed to do. Then as Lia, he was more the center of attention. It was more about him. He was more vocal. He was more talking all the time. So that is really interesting that you say that because a lot of people don't think about how much their personality sort of shifts once they try to do this whole transitioning thing.
Yeah.
So it was a very, very different dynamic. And that to me, again, it was really weird. It was like almost this person, Will, that we had known for so many years just ceased to exist.
Yeah, I would suspect that Will is the type of person, like you said, very quiet, unassuming, but he wants to be maybe more so like someone like yourself, who is a little bit more outgoing.
Well, now I'm outgoing, but back then I was not. Yes, but
yeah, well,
maybe
like, someone who is more outgoing, and he probably doesn't feel like he can do that as Will, and so this is a way for not only for him to get attention, but for him to get affirmation and get an allowance to be boisterous and to act in a completely different way. I don't think it's a coincidence that they call it a dead name, right? They're trying to kill not just the name, but their who they were and become something completely different. And it probably doesn't help. I'm assuming that he was taking hormones.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, again, right? We don't even really know. And that's the other thing about this whole thing is you don't actually really even know what people have done procedure-wise, what they're taking medication-wise. Even in the NCAA, like they don't really have any official rules of it. Just it's between you and your doctor. Submit some paperwork every now and again, right? So I assume so, but again, I don't even really know the full extent. I don't know what they are. I mean, half these hormones are like, you know, they're chemical castration drugs, which has been revealed, and obviously Big Pharma's a lot to profit off of these patients.
Right. Well, that's what I was going to say. Like, if Will was taking hormones, then that also is going to alter his behavior and his mindset.
Definitely.
But I do think a lot of that is motivated by wanting to wanting to be that person, but they don't think that they can be that in this particular state. And it just so happens to be that, becoming a woman was more apropos to achieving it. And on top of that, he can kick a bunch of ass and get the gold medal. When he was doing that as a man, he couldn't reach to that height.
Yeah.
And so I think this entire endeavor has set up a reward system for someone. Listen, I have a lot of empathy for people who are going through all these different things. I think that it's quite possible that William is having a lot of personal issues, and that this became this socially acceptable way of resolving, in his head, resolving the issues that he has with himself. And we socially, at least at that time, which things might be changing, we're allowing for this person to behave this way, to be, clapped for because they came out, how brave that they are. And I can imagine how intoxicating that is, especially when you probably have never received that, or maybe you didn't receive enough of it, whatever you might have in your head and your perception. So I think that I am a bit empathetic when it comes to someone who's doing that, but I do think that from a distance, and I'll ask you this, from a distance, Lia not only was the center of attention, but I think Lia, crossed over into an area where he was more antagonistic. Would you say that might be the case?
And I don't want to say like anyone's antagonistic, really. I hope that would never be anyone's true intentions. But I will say that there was never any acknowledgement that, maybe my teammates feel uncomfortable, right? Throughout the season, it was always anyone who objects to me in any way is a hateful person. And you can go and like, don't take this from me. Right. There's interviews that he's done. He did one with ABC. He did a different swimming podcast. And in both of them, he was just kind of like, I'm happy now. And anyone who objects to me, they're just a hater. They're just a bigot. They're just not accepting. And so there was never any looking at the situation from the outside saying, maybe I understand why my teammates might be uncomfortable or unhappy or whatever it might be. That was never a consideration. And for myself personally, I looked at it a lot during the season. I said, am I missing something here? Right? Maybe the science is there that thinks that this is fair. Or maybe he is really happier being on the team and we should consider allowing him to be. I never agreed with any of those things, but I at least took the time to think through and say, I can maybe understand why you might think this way, or I can maybe understand why someone might come to this conclusion. Right. But I didn't feel like he had done that same reflection. And again, in the university was very big on that. And so we can talk more about this, but in a lot of the meetings that they would have for us on the women's team, they would tell him not to come. It was not a group effort. Oh, let's all work together and come to a fair conclusion. It was, this person has done nothing wrong. Everyone else is the problem. Everyone else is the people who needs the fixing. Everyone else needs therapy. And again, they had told us to go seek therapy. And he was told to not come to that meeting. Right? So it's, I don't know, it felt a little bit like there was no group work here. It was just everyone else is wrong and this one person is in the right.
So it's quite literally not just Lia, but the school was setting up an environment where it's Lia versus everybody else.
Yeah, and they really had, and I think that what encapsulates this is University of Pennsylvania opted to nominate Lia for NCAA Woman of the Year. Each school only gets a handful of nominees, and they chose Lia Thomas. Additionally, if you go on the Penn Instagram, they're featuring Lia Thomas's accomplishments at a great rate. All the photos, every single thing he won, there was a photo of him on the Instagram page. There were a lot of other athletes, even in swimming, that were very accomplished that season, had great seasons, other sports that were not featured as much. So that shows, surface level how much they liked this, how much they wanted to pump it up. But in terms of the meetings and things we had to go through, we had regular meetings that they would tell us we were all horrible people. And again, Lia was told to not attend them. It was, the rest of the team is the problem. You've done nothing wrong. And again, on paper, I guess he hadn't really done anything wrong because NCAA allowed this to happen. So, I mean, I can be mad about it, but based on the rules, I guess, yeah, technically he didn't even do anything wrong. So, but again, the university did not really support us at all. It was, again, you're the problem, you're the issue, seek therapy. That was a thing we were told, which to me was a wild thought.
Yeah, and that's so there's a lot of attention, anger, frustration towards Lia, which I understand. But we have to talk about the enablers. The enablers enable for this thing to happen. If the school didn't allow it to happen, actually we can go even to the body of the NCAA. If the NCAA didn't have this, then there would be no reason to even get upset at Lia. If Lia wanted to be Lia and swim on the men's team, no one would care.
No.
It had to be that someone carved a pathway into your particular sport to compete against you, theoretically, and take someone else's spot, which I'm assuming is, there's only a certain amount of spots on a team. So he's taking someone else's spot that could potentially be there and compete at your school. There had to be somebody who was part of this body to allow this to happen. And I don't think there's enough anger towards, like Jennifer Say recognizes the bigger picture.
Yeah.
But I think most people focus purely on Lia and the behavior of Lia and the decision of Lia. But Lia wouldn't be able to do anything without the enablers allowing it to happen and praising it at the same time. I think it would be a different story if Lia said, I want to be on the women's team. And there was this fight and it became this battle.
Or like a lawsuit or something now.
Right. And then, the school lost because of the courts. It was something of that nature.
Yeah.
But there was no fight. It was red carpet all the way through. Ladies, this is what it's going to be. Will's not a lady. Deal with it and just move on. And if you have a complaint about the status quo changing, then there's something wrong with you. So I think it reminds me of someone that I knew, where it was like every time, someone that I know, not new, but someone that I know years ago, where they were combative, right? And I would be like, I would listen to them and they would say, I don't get along with this person. And I'm like, I get along with that person. That person's fine. And it would be the same MO. And their conclusion was, something is wrong with all these people. And my thing was, well, the common denominator is you. So I don't think everybody has a problem. I think you have a problem with everybody. And I think this is one of those things where they're saying, no. There's nothing wrong with Lia. There's something wrong, not just with you, Paula, but everybody who dares to criticize it, which is a lot of people. There's something wrong with society.
Yeah, that's what and not to get a little bit political, but that's what a lot of people on the other side are saying about the election, right? They're saying there's something wrong with these millions of Americans that voted the other way. It says, maybe we should take a look inwards and see why maybe they might think that, or why maybe they might have made that decision.
Right. But that requires you to be humble and have some self-reflection as to what exactly is going on. But the behavior has been to blame. Something's wrong with you. You need to change. Complain about society. Everybody's wrong. Everybody's this and that. And not ask the question like, well, maybe you're radical.
Yeah.
And everyone is relatively normal. And that, there's nothing actually going on here. But I think that maybe Trump had won. And, one of the first things he talked about is protecting Title IX.
Yep.
Which prior to, let's say, 2020 or 2019, no one really had a problem. I didn't think it's a radical thing to say, all right, women have their own sports and that's it. That's what's so crazy about this entire thing. If you think about it, Donald Trump ran on 2008 Democrat talking points, and everyone's making him sound like he's radical. The man's not a conservative whatsoever. His life hasn't been conservative. He's relatively liberal. Matter of fact, in my lifetime, he's the first president going into office who affirmed gay marriage.
Yep, that's what everyone talks about all the time. there's that clip from the vice presidential debates, I think in '08, of Joe Biden saying, neither myself nor Barack Obama approve of gay marriage, or whatever that. You can go find the clip.
Yeah.
But I remember that so vividly that people are like resurfacing. And that's the thing. It's really so funny to me that this has even became, it was like one of the top political issues of this election.
Mm-hmm.
Right. The ad space on this issue was crazy. I mean, I filmed some sort of targeted attack ads for some of the Senate races. No one probably saw them. They were very selective, but so did other people. There were so many different individuals who were part of this issue shooting this election, shooting ads on this issue. And in 2020, this was nowhere. I don't think a single political candidate from anywhere, any side of the aisle, presidential, whatever, to local races, was ever mentioning the issue of men being in women's spaces or women's sports or whatever it might be. So yeah, I think it shows really how far we went in 4 years to get this to be one of the top, I think it was the top cultural issue of this past election.
Cultural issue?
One of the top ones, I would say. I mean, right?
Yeah, I would say from a, definitely not political, because obviously you can talk about the economy and stuff like that.
Yeah, no, and the border, and there's so many other things. But
yeah, I would say cultural, yes. I would also include the children aspect, because obviously Lia is an adult, is in college, but the children aspect of transitioning in secret, teaching kids that there's fluidity and all this particular stuff, which is confusing for children. Like, what does that mean? Yeah. Because kids understand the basics of life. Like, you don't have to
overcomplicate it.
You don't have to overcomplicate it. If you say, that's a boy and that's a girl. Oh, okay. Like, they get it. Like, it makes sense. I see that they can see the differences. When you try to overcomplicate it, it's meant to confuse. And I don't know if you're a religious person or. Yeah. Okay. So someone explained to me one time how when it comes to God, God is not confusing. Yeah. Right? He's about truth and clarity. It's very clear. Which is why, like, for me, I think I'm a Christian. So like the Christian faith, for me, the more I learned, I was like, makes sense. Yeah. Like, it's very clear what's right and what's wrong. It's not like, well, in this circumstance, it's right. It's very clear as to what's right and what's wrong. And I think when it's not clear, it's because someone's trying to muddy it. And that's the thing. The opposite of clarity is confusion, deception, right? That is not of God. That is of something else. So I think that when you start looking at people who are purposefully moving towards deception, I don't want to say it's with the intent to be demonic, but it's not.
I mean, a little bit. Like,
some of them.
There is some level of. Like, well, let me share you a quick thing. A family friend of mine that I know, a very religious man, has never voted before, ever, before this year. And I mean, I'm not gonna out him, but you can figure out who he voted for. And I asked him, I said he registered to vote for the first time ever in his late 60s. Oh, wow. I said, why are you, what changed your mind? And you know what he said? He said he saw what they did at the DNC and they brought the abortion ban. If you saw that. And then he said, quote, that's demonic. And I knew that I needed to make sure I fought against that. Literally registered to vote the next day after seeing that and voted in this election. And you can assume how he voted. But that's it. So, I mean, there is some level of that just, it feels like there is this sort of desire to disrupt the norms, to disrupt society, to change things for the worse. But again, I mean, I don't want to, they're not possessed by Satan. I mean, there's some crazy people that say stuff like that, but there is some level of like, that is worshiping into the devil. Yeah. And actually I took this class in college that was crazy. And they made us watch this video about how abortions were satanic rituals and they should be allowed to do it because it's the freedom of religion. They made us watch a video about, yes. And so that's what and it was like the most disturbing thing. And I was like, I cannot believe my parents are paying thousands of dollars for me to sit here and watch this video and then have to analyze it. So there is some level of it. They like it. They like buy into it a little bit.
So they said the quiet part out loud.
Oh, I can actually send you the video afterwards. Okay. I can go find it. Because I refound it the other week. I think after this whole the abortion ban conversation came up. Because I was like, this is not real. And it was supposed to be like a joke. They weren't like really saying it was actually a satanic ritual. But what their argument is they wanted to try to protect abortion rights by saying it's a religious ritual of the people who are quote unquote Satanists.
So, okay. So they're not Satanists, but they were trying to use the Satanist argument.
No, do you know like the Satanic Temple, like that religion? I think it's like that group. So they're not like formal worshiping Satanists, but they're a religious organization to try to get religious protections by doing whatever they want. And that happened to be one of the things they wanted to do.
So it's all right. So those particular people are interesting. So I think there are two types of Satanists.
Yeah.
There are Satanists who really do like the crazy blood rituals and stuff like that. And then there are the Satanists who just troll Christians.
Yes. And I think it was part of the trolling group.
Yeah. And it's always them. They did something at one of the state capitals where they put some sort of satanic statue.
I remember that. Yeah.
And they said, well, if you can put your Christian one, we can put our satanic one, right? And they're attention-seeking, highly individualistic, self-absorbed individuals. And what's very interesting, if they're making that argument, it's not really for them. It's to piss off Christians. Like everything that they do is in the counter to what Christians want. So if Christians say we don't want abortion because it's sinful, then they say, well, we should have it. Listen, we're a church too. When in reality, they're atheists and they don't believe in any of that stuff.
I don't know what they even believe.
Well, that's exactly it. They don't. That's the funny part, is that they don't believe in either. They don't believe in the Christian faith or Satan. They think that Satan is just this boogeyman that Christians made up. And so to piss off the Christians, they say, oh yeah, we believe in him. Sure we do. And that's I think that's fascinating.
I'll send you the video after, because it's really ridiculous. But again, it was like a professor at school was like, isn't this so great and creative that they did this? And I was like, I kind of find this offensive. Like, I was like, I don't know how to feel about this.
Yeah.
And I think I was 20 maybe when I took that class. And so I was like, I really don't know how to feel about this.
Well, yeah. You should feel good that Satanists think that you should kill your child.
It's just, and that's something. And then also I noticed a lot with, tying back to like my experiences, right? I noticed this a lot in the whole trans movement, is that it really became religious. Like I saw a lot of sort of religious undertones. And I remember I had this conversation with very early on, actually I think before I even ever publicly spoke about this, I had a conversation with a friend who is not a religious person.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, I think that the Christian faith is good. It was one of those people who's like, I'm not really a Christian, but I think that it's really good. And also I've noticed these parallels of people who are not Christian, but then buy into this transgender ideology, because there is some level of religious organization to it, right? It's sort of worshiping certain people are above others. And they, bowing down to, and other aspects of it, sort of having religious comparisons.
Yeah.
I haven't done like a full analysis on it, so that's kind of like where I'm at. But maybe you agree that there is some level of sort of, religious organization of the whole movement. And I think others who have been part of the detransitioners, a lot of them that I've met, have also said similar things, that they feel like it, has felt, quasi-religious.
Yes. There are cultish aspects to it. For example, we just talked about Lia being told, you're separate from everybody else.
Yeah.
And that's isolation. Cults use isolation to keep you focused on whatever ideology that's in hand. You use isolation to control people.
Mm-hmm.
Human beings are social creatures. We're supposed to interact with each other. We're supposed to discuss things, disagree with things, agree with things, work together. At the end of the day. And so when you separate someone from other people, you're training them to distrust other people. And you can only trust me. That's what, I actually just wrote something about this in the New York Post. This is what abusers do in relationships.
And that's, blanking on her name, but I did a panel at the Icons conference. I'm sure you're familiar with them, last summer, so
Mhm.
2023. And the introduction that we gave, I think her name is Dina. I'm blanking on her last name. Gave the introduction and said that like a lot of the tactics they used on myself and my teammates and Riley and other girls who were going through it during the season mirrors those of abusers.
Yeah.
And when she said that, I mean, I hadn't really thought about it that way. And I'm sitting getting ready to speak, and I'm like kind of going through my brain, being like, oh my gosh, like having this sort of emotional response and processing a lot of things I had never really thought about before.
Yeah.
And so yes, like I exactly what you mean. It's this level of, yeah, like sort of it's like putting us into an abusive psychological relationship with the different individuals at play.
Oh yeah, for sure. I'm sure people have told you that you caused this to happen, and you're like, no, they did this. It's like you made me hit you. It's that kind of.
Yeah, and that's the other thing is like, this was not told to my teammates, but the
Mhm.
girls at Harvard, right? So it's school we competed against. They were sent in writing. They said, if you ever speak out against this, you will contribute to someone committing suicide. It's
That's
so ridiculous, but that's the tactic that they constantly use, and that's what people. And actually, I was thinking about that on the drive down here. I had this protester at one of my campus speeches at the University of Iowa,
Mhm.
and this student came up to me and they said, "You're disgusting because you do not care if a trans person commits suicide, and you're contributing to that." I would, and I was so taken aback by that because I had a really close friend lose his life to suicide, and it was not something that I would wish upon anyone in the entire world. Just tragic, 23 years old.
Yeah.
And and like, of course I would never encourage that, but at the same time, if I speak out against this man being on my team or in my locker room and someone chooses to take their life, you cannot put the responsibility of that on someone who's chosen to speak out their opinions, their feelings, feeling unsafe. And that's sort of what they've tried to do. And I remember that person in Oklahoma was like some non-binary student
Yeah.
died or committed suicide, and they were tagging every single conservative quote unquote influencer or poster or whatever, saying that each and every one of us was responsible for that individual's death. In a
Yeah.
state I've never been to a person I've never met, because our quote unquote harmful rhetoric is what killed them. And that's what they keep doing. And again, no girl or any normal human being would ever want someone to commit suicide. I don't care how much we disagree. I would never wish that upon anyone. And again, that's the tactic that I've seen time and time again that they try to use. And right, leading back to the girls at Harvard being told this in writing, that's enough to deter any girl from speaking out against this, because of course you don't want the responsibility of if someone chooses to take their life. Like, that's insane.
Yeah. No, you're exactly right. Like that is emotional
Yeah.
manipulation. That's to disarm you, right?
Yeah.
Because normal people don't wish for people to
No.
commit suicide.
Nobody does. No one
No one
does.
does. Like insane people, maybe.
Maybe,
but
yeah.
but most people aren't insane, or incredibly vindictive to that degree. Um, so it's to disarm you. It's to get you to step back. And when you look at them and you keep doing what you're doing and not care because you know it's a lie and you don't argue with them, then they don't know what to do. I think that's what people. I think there's something about these particular type of activists. There's something about portraying strength, but in their own way that they think what strength looks like.
Yeah.
And true strength does not look like what they
Yeah.
show. For them, strength is to bully. Strength is to demean. Strength is to be the thing that they think that, well, this is what strong people do, right? So it's the same way where they talk about patriarchy. Patriarchy is the most perverse version of what a man behaves, and they think this is the sought after behavior of the average man, and most men are not
No.
like this. But they don't know. They don't know this. This is their perverse view on it. And it's the same way their perverse view of strength to fight for the thing that they care about is to be the bully, right? While complaining about you being the bully. They don't realize that they are the thing that they're complaining about. And it's this weird area of manipulation where they're trying to disarm you, becoming the bully, using tactics that are highly manipulative while at the same time claiming you're doing the thing that they're actually doing.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've seen that a lot with the other side, and I think that my biggest thing though, so like for myself
Mhm.
politically, right? I was actually pretty conservative starting, maybe 17, 18 years old. I always sort of met more with those ideologies, but I never had a negative viewpoint of people on the opposing side because I said, okay, yeah, I don't necessarily maybe agree with some of your policies, but I thought that they were coming from a good place.
Right.
And I think that this experience is really what made me see how problematic some of their thinking is. And not everyone. I don't want to categorize like every single person who might be more left leaning or liberal or vote for a certain candidate. I don't ever want to do that. But in this situation, I really saw again the lack of tolerance of anyone having a different viewpoint than you. And it was very obvious to me at every single stage that it was really, if you do not believe exactly what we believe and want you to believe, you are the problem. There was no room for any varying difference in viewpoints. And I think that's really when I started to see again, like they were more vindictive, they were more aggressive, they were more bullies than just, yeah, you simply just don't maybe think the same way I do.
Right.
And this, I think, really escalated my perspective of that. And there have been people on the other side, I think, who are willing to engage in conversations and sort of have been reflective, but I wouldn't say it's the majority.
Yeah.
And that to me was really, that was really my wake up call, right? Like that's kind of the moment I jumped up and I was like, okay, wait a minute. I used to think that you guys maybe could work through things or have viewpoints that are different. And then I saw none of that. And again, um, my moment where I really realized how bad it was is I tried to write an op-ed for the school newspaper about this issue.
Oh man, I'm sure that went great.
Well, so and it's this whole situation. And actually it's funny because I was approached by them. They were like,
Mm.
"We want somebody to write something from the opposing viewpoint," because they had been pushing out all of these super pro Leah articles. I said, "Okay, let's give it a stab." And they send me all these edits. And they're like, "This line is offensive. This is too much. This you can't say." And I'm like, "Okay, okay." I'm conceding on every single point. Finally, the softest article in the entire world you could possibly write about it. That's literally just like, here are the Olympics. Men are faster than women. Here's some science. Men are faster than women. This is not fair. NCAA, please do something. That was the premise of the article. It gets published. 1 hour later, pulled off the website, retracted, no notice to anyone. The editor I was working with, I tried to get in contact with him. He dodged my calls for over a week, finally calls me and says, half the staff threatened to quit over the article being up because the student writers said they couldn't be associated with student-led transphobia. The article doesn't even really mention Thomas at all. The rule was actually I had to say she, her if I mentioned him, even though I didn't even really mention him at all. And it was at that point where I said, okay, this is so much further than just different viewpoints and different ideas. There's zero tolerance for someone who might have a different viewpoint.
Mm.
And I've actually republished the article that was written originally. And to be honest, it is so soft that I think if I published that article tomorrow, that my followers would probably scream at me and be angry because it is the softest representation of the argument humanly possible. And that was too much for them. That was way too much. That was, you've gone too far. You're transphobic. You're all these disgusting things. And that moment was really sort of when the fire started to light under me because I was like, okay, this is the softest version I can represent my argument.
Right.
And it's too much.
I kind of wonder, like a school like UPenn, how did we get to a point where these young people are so fragile? And so I'll say this as
Mhm.
I'm assuming you don't have any kids yet, right?
Yep.
Okay. I say this as a parent because I'm very much so hard on what a parent is supposed to be, especially because I was a child who grew up without his father being
Mhm.
an active member in his life. So I'm very much so like, I have high expectations for parents,
Yep.
basically, and including myself. So I'm also hard on myself. Um, when people complain about your
Yeah.
generation, I'm like, well, who raised them?
Yeah.
Right? So the parents of the world, not the world, the parents of the West, because this is mostly a
It's a
Western
Western
issue,
thing. Yeah.
are making their children fragile. they're preventing them from experiencing hardship, not allowing them to feel some sort of emotional pain, but some of it is necessary. Like if you've had a breakup,
Yeah.
right? You learn from that breakup.
Yeah.
But you should be glad that you did go through it. So
Yeah.
now you're better. So if you do have another relationship that doesn't really work out, you kind of work things out. And
Yeah.
maybe you go to your mom or your dad or somebody and you can discuss these things as to what may have happened, or, but you learn from it. Like, so I think people are failing to realize you learn from these hardships, you learn from these difficulties. And I think that there are so many kids who've had the road just completely paved over. There's no bumps, and everything is nice and smooth, and that they quite literally cannot handle some sort of difficulty, which is why I was hearing about how in college, and you would
Yeah.
know more than I do, how their mental health um was it like facilities are just like rampant. Like there's a ton of mental health professionals, a ton of advocates. If you ever need anything, there's
Well, I mean,
someone.
they told us to go make an appointment if
Yeah.
we objected to Lia. So
Right. Like there's an entire thing where they are well prepared for mental health issues. Why? Because there's so many kids who feel a level of angst. Now that they're
Mhm.
independent, sort of independent, but independent at school. They're going up against kids who are smarter than them.
yeah.
They're going up against kids who are faster, better than them, whatever it might be.
Mhm.
And they thought they were the best thing in the world. They were told that by everybody that knows them, that they're absolutely amazing. And now they're struggling to deal with the real world, that you are not the best thing in the world. There's always somebody who's better than you. You're always going to face some sort of difficulty, and it's okay. And they don't know how to handle that. And I
Yeah.
think you now also have an ideological fragility where they can't handle someone who even just like strays a little bit,
Yeah, a tiny bit.
a tiny bit. And it's just become so ideological for them. Um, and and so like when people talk about like the entitlement, they're fragile and all this other stuff, I'm like,
Who raised him?
who's raised them? My son is not that. And I know why he's not that, because we raised him not to be fragile.
Yeah, I think part of it though, so my mom immigrated from Taiwan. And so I mean, it was like quite the opposite. It was like you are never good enough. Why you come home with a 97? Where's the other 3 points? And this is not to shade my mom. I love my mother, but and that was not how I was raised really at all because of this parent. But I looked at a lot of the other kids I grew up with in a predominantly like mostly white area, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, oh, it's not your fault. Everything's okay.
I'm going to talk to the teacher.
Yeah, like all of this type of stuff. And so, yeah, I think that there is some level of that. But I think what I don't know who said this to me, but someone was saying that also each generation kind of has its own issues. So like the generation that raised my parents, for example, right, they were maybe ignored the kids a little bit more. So then that generation of parents, like my parents, they need to coddle the kids more and give them the attention that they felt like they didn't have as kids.
Right.
Then my generation is a little bit more coddled. So like as parents, we're going to be like a little bit more self-centered about ourselves and not care about the kids. Someone was saying it's sort of like generationally.
It's a response.
It's a response, and it's kind of a back and forth.
Right.
And I was thinking about it. I mean, I'm sure it's not the case, like true in every single case, but there is some, I think, level of that, right? That it's a back and forth. You sort of do what you felt like you didn't have, and then it's too much, and then it'll.
Yeah, wherever you feel that you lack, you want to make sure, or you lacked as a kid.
Yeah.
You want to make sure that if you're a caring parent. Let's just say that.
Yeah.
Some parents they didn't have it.
Care, yeah.
Guess what? You ain't gonna have it. I don't care. Like those are terrible parents.
Yeah.
But for parents who mean well, who care, they want to make sure. Like I'll just use me as an example. I didn't have my father involved in my life, and so I didn't know what a good father looked like. But my baseline was, I'm going to be the opposite of my father.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm going to be
there. Yeah.
active in my son's life. And so, as time goes on, you figure things out. But I cared enough to figure these things out.
Yeah.
And so, I make sure I tell my son that I'm proud of him. I didn't hear that when I was a kid. So there definitely is truth to that, where if you have basically two options. you either repeat the behavior and you just normalize it and you just assume every kid is treated like shit. And so you're going to treat your kids like shit and that's just what's normal. Or you're going to say, that thing I really didn't like. And I want to make sure that I don't do that to my kids. So you basically have two pathways. I think that there is a segment of people who are choosing that path to not go through the thing that they went through as kids, but they're overcompensating. Like they're doing too much.
Yeah, they're doing too much.
And they're out of balance. There needs to be some sort of balance. I'm not saying that your kid needs to get punched in the face and you just do nothing about it, like get up and deal with it, like how people talk about it. Like their parents are just like so hardcore where they're just like, welcome to the world. You get punched in the face. I'm not saying you have to be like that, but my son experienced certain things and he went through it. Matter of fact, there were things that I knew he was going to go through and it wasn't going to work out. And I let him go through it so that we could talk afterwards so he could understand. Because sometimes as a parent, if you try to keep them from doing it, like, actually, let me ask you, because you're a girl, and this is more pronounced in girls. Was there ever a guy that you really liked, but your parents were like, don't date that person?
Yeah.
And then because they said don't date it, you really
wanted to do it
even more. That's one of those things.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of a rebellious reaction.
Yeah.
And so sometimes you just got to let them figure it out themselves. But sometimes parents push too hard and then it becomes us against my mean parents who want to keep us from love. It becomes that thing.
But the other thing, though, I think is my generation is just like, what I've noticed a trend is that just people aren't told no.
Yes.
Right. That's the biggest thing is I think like part of it is, I don't know if it's maybe the generation of parents that raised us, but are they afraid to say no for some reason?
Oh, yeah.
Like, and I just remember that when I was little, like, there would always be, maybe there's something that we'd want in a store or whatever. And my mom would always say, no, like you already have one or you can't. I remember like I wanted a Webkins when I was whatever 8. I'm like, no, I wanted no. And I remember this one time we were at the store and I think this happened with my brother. It was my brother who wanted something. He's a little bit older than me, but my mom just said no. And he said, okay, put the toy back. And the storekeeper told my mom, I've never seen a parent say no before like that, and also have the kid be so responsive and say okay. But so apparently that's like not normalized. But I think that's the biggest thing is and leading back to like the whole Lia thing, right? It's like, okay, even if the NCAA rules allowed him to, why did no one just say, hey, no, don't do that? Like that's not acceptable. That's not wise. No. And I think that's the biggest, I think in my generation, right, is that there's just this, it's what I want all the time. There's no tolerance for no.
Yes, that is 100% correct. There is a fear of telling children no, as if no is always a bad thing. Like if a 5-year-old finds a gun and they say, I want to pick it up, well, you're going to tell them no, you don't play with guns, right? So there's a reason that you would tell a child no, and it's for their own good. Yeah. Children are the one group of human beings in our society that does not have full rights.
No, and they shouldn't.
And they shouldn't.
And they shouldn't be. Same thing with your kid wanting to transition. Right? Why are some of these parents, I mean, a lot of it is actually really narcissistic parents that, they want a trans kid.
And some of them are manipulated by
medical professionals. Right. Absolutely. But in other instances, I think some things or the parents will sort of feel duped in and they're like, I don't know how to say no. Like it'll make them happy. It'll whatever, but going against what isn't good for them.
Right.
So I don't know like how we really got to that point, but I think that's the biggest thing. And I don't know, I think maybe someone else said this in regards to the Lia Thomas thing. And I sort of examined just maybe not even just trans individuals in my age group, but just people in my age group in general, right? I think there is this lack of, a lot of people just have never been told they can't do something. It's whatever you want all the time.
I've talked about this before with my son. When he was, I want to say he might have been 2 or 3, he would play like this little game and he would lose and he would get upset and he would really pout. And I guess it's sort of normal, but I didn't he seemed like he was doing a little bit too much. And I was like, I think he's not handling like things not going his way. So from that moment, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to tell him no.
Yeah.
And set up disappointment for him. So he'd say, can I have a cookie?
No.
No. And I could easily give him a cookie. He didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah.
I would say no. And he would, he would pout. And then by like the 5th time he would ask for something, I would say no. He just got better and better to the point where he was like, I said no. And he was like, okay. And just move on. And there were times where I was like 10 minutes later, I'll be like, you can go ahead and do that because of how you responded. And so he just understood at a very young age that no is on the table, that you're not going to get these things. So like what that's supposed to teach us is that when we become adults, we're going to face no all the time. There's going to be someone you want to date and they're going to be like, no. There's going to be a job that you want, they're going to say no.
Been in all of those situations.
Right. You're going to face no all the time, and you have to be prepared for it, and you have to respond to it and learn from it. And if you just spend your entire life someone saying yes, and you face that no, I can imagine how that
you'd
feels
have a
like
temper tantrum or whatever,
or a mental health breakdown. I gotta see a professional because someone told me no. But that to me, obviously, when you become an adult, you're now responsible for resolving whatever issues that you have. But at the same time, we're supposed to train our children to be as resilient as possible when they become adults, and also to stay there. Like my son's 19 now, but I'm still there. Like if my son wants to talk about something, I'm always here. Like as a parent, you're still there for your kid, even though they're an adult and they're making their way into the world. But you're setting them up for failure if you don't give them child bites of adulthood, right? Yeah. And that was one of those things. You need to start a parenting
advice column or something. I feel like you'd fix half the problems of like that I'm seeing these people. And then they tell you then you're having a mental health crisis, and then you go to a therapist, and then also the therapist will also tell you everyone else is the problem and you're valid. Have you noticed that? I don't know if you've ever been to one.
Oh yeah.
But that is sort of what they're trained to do, and I'm like, this is so pointless. Like if you go to therapy, you need to be working on something. You're not just sitting there for an hour and having them tell you you're God's gift to the earth and you're doing nothing wrong and everyone else is your problem, or cut people out of your life. I think that's another thing.
Yes.
They start doing is like just cut out anyone negative. Well, it doesn't work like that. I can get in an argument with my mom and they're going to tell me the best advice is to never speak to her again. Like that's not reality. That's not life. That's not how you better yourself. You better their life. That's not how you work on things.
Right.
So there's that other concept where it's like they're sort of ingraining, cut people out of, and then I've seen this with the election.
Yeah.
Cut out those family members. You saw this on Twitter, maybe. Cut out the family members that voted the other way. Never speak to them again. I'm not going home to Thanksgiving because my, great uncle, whatever, voted, for the bigots. And it's like, what? Who is teaching you this?
Yeah, that actually, that's a column I wrote talking about this whole thing. You need to just forget about your Trump supporting family members and just move on with the rest of your life. Once again, that's cultish isolationist.
And that's the thing that's so people always say to me, I mean, like, I actually did a poll on my followers on Instagram and I said, do you guys have friends with different viewpoints? And there was actually a good portion that literally said no. I do not. And I'm like, that's like, I most of my followers, I assume, agree with me politically, but like, that's a little bit dangerous. It's like, I do have friends that, I have had friends who have called me horrible names and told me to never speak to them again based on my viewpoints, which, it's fine. But I got coffee the other day with one of my friends who I've known for many years. And she told me, this was before the election, and she said, by the way, I'm voting for Kamala Harris. She she was like really nervous to tell me that almost, because she knows, again, how it's like, if you see what I post online, you might be a little bit nervous.
Right.
And I said, okay, I really wish you wouldn't. You know that I'm definitely not doing that. But I support why you might believe that. I wish you would change your mind on these things. I could understand why you might be coming from the way that you're coming from. And it was fine. And I just, said, okay, we'll see you the next time. Hope, you have a good day. Like it was really, and I told someone that story the other day and they were shocked based on, like what I obviously do for work, what I post online, that I would even be welcome to have that interaction or conversation or whatever. And I, but that's just life. Like you're not going to have everyone agree exactly what you believe. You're not going to have everyone come to the exact same conclusions based on their life experiences. And that for some reason is just really not normalized in society, especially with the people my age and especially the women my age. I've noticed they've done studies on this, but like the men my age are leaning really conservative. So maybe like your son is, not much younger than me. And so maybe his friends are sort of in that boat too. But it's weird because the men are really, really conservative and the women are getting more and more liberal in my age group, which is really interesting to see. And I've noticed it though, because the people that reach out to me and say, hey, I'm really supportive of what you're working on are usually men.
Right.
So
yeah,
I don't know.
My son has, matter of fact, one of his really good friends, he was like, they discuss these things. Actually, we were just talking about it a couple of days ago. They discuss these things now that they're adults, and I believe my son voted in this last election for the first time. Now that he's 19, but he was like, yeah, we talk about these things and we disagree, but it's whatever. I'm like, cool. Like for me, I'm an independent, former Democrat.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's different from the people who follow me who've been Republicans their entire life, staunchly conservative. They've always thought this particular way. And so for me, I'm kind of from both worlds where I spent a lot of time around Democrats and now I'm spending more time around Republicans, and I get both. Like I understand why someone would want to vote for Kamala. I mean, disagree with the reasons why, but I understand. I understand that not every Democrat is this far left crazy person, and that a winning message is maybe we shouldn't mutilate children, right? Because even Democrats can get behind that. So there's always that, I call it like, people understand whichever side you're on, you presume the worst of the other side.
Yeah, of course.
And so the reason why you wouldn't vote for a Democrat is not the reason why someone's voting Democrat.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's like I'm voting on their worst. I'm saying I hate them because of their worst policy issue, and they're voting on their best one, whatever it might be, right? So, yeah. And that's the other thing, though, I've had in this space is I gotten to spend time with people who have come to these beliefs for many different reasons. And so, obviously, I go to the South a lot, and those are people who have grown up I don't think they've even met a Democrat. Some of these people, right? Like growing up, everyone in their high school is Republican. Their parents are, everyone's going to church and conservative and all this stuff. But I grew up in this Northeast, right around here, where it's like pretty much the opposite. It's every single person I knew was a Democrat. In high school in 2016, we didn't have classes for a week after Donald Trump won. And so for me, I've seen that perspective my entire life. And it's actually a lot of those things that actually shaped me to believe the things that I believed, because I saw the meltdowns firsthand, and I said, let me examine really why we might think these things. And that's really why I started to get political. But if I hadn't been surrounded by people on the opposing side, I don't think my viewpoints pushing me the other way would have been as strong.
Right.
And so I think that a lot of it is like my ideas also are kind of getting tested, or I see things and I go, or even on our side, I'm like, oh, I don't necessarily know if I agree with that. Let me think this through more. But because, again, I've been surrounded by so many people with different viewpoints, it's really tested sort of my perspective. And what's really interesting, and a lot of people in this space that are my age, their parents are Republicans. And mine are not actually really diehard Republicans. They voted for candidates from both sides frequently. But it was always a place where we could talk. Like my parents would always talk about the issues, and because I was raised in that environment, it allowed me to come to my beliefs naturally.
Right.
And that's something I've noticed a lot of their people my age that work in the space that I do haven't really had those same environment growing up. Like they just, both their parents agree on everything and have told them, and then they came to the same beliefs because their parents also have the same beliefs.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense. For me, my viewpoints changed. Actually, they didn't change all that much. I think the Democratic Party changed more than I changed.
That graphic, Colin. Do you know Colin, right?
Yeah.
His little graphic.
Yeah.
You guys,
Like I think my viewpoints are more refined than they used to be.
yeah,
Because there were things that I was saying, but if you were to challenge me on it, I'd probably fall apart because I didn't really think of it all the
yeah,
way through. Whereas now, if you ask me why I believe, like everything that I write, I've thought about.
yeah, of course.
And so I've also thought about the counter. Like you're about to, if you're going to challenge me, I'm writing publicly, then I know what the response
Yep.
is because I've thought about this. And so I'm not just coming up with a rebuttal because I want to be right. I've thought about this and I don't agree with your assertion or your belief. This is what I've clearly thought about. I thought about it so much that I'm writing 750 words in the New York Post about it. And so I'm very clear and
Yep.
I know exactly why I'm saying what I'm saying. I could be wrong.
Yeah.
But
always.
this is why I believe at this current time why I'm saying what I'm saying. And I think that what we do as, because I would call you a public figure now.
Yeah.
What we do as public figures, we're always open to scrutiny. And so I think it's very good that you're like, let me refine this. Let me think about this because someone will come after you. Someone will say, this you, with an old tweet or something like that.
Yeah, and there's times when you do have to respond to things you've been wrong on or
Yeah.
you're misinformed and that always scares me, but it's like you have to take it with grace.
Yeah.
Or you're part of the problem, right? And that's sort of what I've had to like just convince myself, right? I have to be comfortable that sometimes I might be wrong.
Yeah. I mean, failure is not
Yeah.
always failure. Sometimes you're wrong, and that's how I ended up where I'm at because I realized I was wrong. And I care more about learning and growing rather than giving the appearance of being right and while remaining wrong. So I think it's good what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, we try, but it's always hard because there's always noise. There's always people with different opinions or people with whatever scrutiny. And I think that makes it a little bit challenging. But I think it's just really just being like confident in your position, right? Like, yeah, I do believe whatever I'm about to say, but I can also look and say I can grow and refine. And if I make a mistake, I'm also willing to say, hey, guys, maybe I wasn't so right about that.
Yeah. Yeah. I see nothing wrong with that.
But I will say though, don't say that I'm going to be coming to you in 5 years and saying I was right and Lia Thomas was fit to compete because that one I know is wrong. And I don't want anyone to think that. I think that we can all agree with that.
Yeah. I was going to say we're nearing the end.
Yeah.
And I usually ask whoever I'm sitting and sharing. By the way, how was your sushi?
It was good. I've just been talking so much. I'm going to have to eat a lot of this off camera.
Yeah.
It was good.
I get it.
It's hard to eat when talking.
That is very true.
I'm always just like, I'm sitting there and I'm like.
Yeah, so I always ask, are you optimistic about the future?
Honestly, I am. And I think a lot of it is, I think something with the election and all of that is for the first time ever, I think there's actually room for ideas. So the past several years of the election, the Republicans, have you ever heard of the Republicans even having ideas about anything? Really, no, right?
No.
It's always been kind of offensive, trying to combat and win and just, we tax cuts. We haven't really heard of any like new ideas. And now there is this opportunity now for people to present ideas that are new and different. And so I think for the first time, I really am hopeful that, again, because we have the opportunity now to think. And again, I know people can have their opinions about Trump and certain picks. And while, I might agree or not agree with any of them or whatever, I think they are doing thinking.
Yeah.
I have noticed that it is thinking, there is thoughts, there's new ideas, there's new people, there's new opportunities. I mean, right, we have former Democrats that are part of some of his cabinet picks, and that's sort of a new idea concept. And so that does give me a lot of hope that, again, just there's time for ideas. And yes, you can present something that's going to be wrong, but at least we're now in a position where we feel like we can present those things. So that does give me hope. But that being said, I mean, there is a lot of work to be done.
Yeah.
And I don't, there's a lot that I'm sure they want to get done. And I don't even know if they'll have time to. And I think that's going to be something that we're going to see play out in the next couple of years.
Yeah.
As always. So I am hopeful, and but I think again, it's always a fight. I mean, one thing I will say on my issue is I live in New York, and this ballot initiative passed that essentially redefines in the New York Constitution sex can now mean however you identify your gender identity, your gender expression, whatever the term that exact term it's online, but it's redefined basically however you identify. And that is going to be really dangerous. It's being added to the New York Constitution because enough people voted for it.
Mm.
So there is still work to be done. And I think that that's hard sometimes when people are like, oh, well, we've won all these, the presidency and all this different stuff. It's like, okay, but there's still things you have to fix and still things you have to work on.
Yeah.
So that is, I mean, just more to keep fighting for, I guess.
No, absolutely. And Trump can only do so much.
Yeah.
And he has 4 years. That's actually a major downside.
That's something, see, I will say this and maybe I'll get some hate, but that is the one actual criticism I had a couple of years ago when we were wondering if Trump was going to run again, right? Before he'd announced. Said, but he can only be president for 4 more years. And that is hard because then the party has to, I mean, everyone can point to JD Vance and say he's the obvious pick, but we have to actually make that happen. And so that's hard, right? He only has 4 years. And that was something I brought up to a lot of people saying that, I'm a little bit concerned.
Yeah. Politically speaking, he's a lame duck president. Part of the strength of becoming the president was that in your first term, you can leverage that you're going to be here for another 4 years.
Yep.
Whereas let's say the opposition party wants to say, well, we'll just wait it out because you're going to be gone soon, then it's a different story. First term is always different than the second term.
Mm-hmm.
And so the stuff that is pressing to get done is usually done under the first term. But, he has 4 years. Now, the only thing that benefits him right now is that all 3 branches and is a more conservative leaning justice, the Supreme Court. So those things work in his favor, but it's not a guarantee that everything is going to fly through because everybody's Republican. There are different factions of the Republican Party. Everybody has their own interests and what they want. Everybody's want to pass this bill. We got to add on this pork and do all this bullshit.
Yeah.
So that's going to be like an obvious thing that's going to happen. But we'll see. We'll see.
And like that's the thing is like I'm excited to see, and so that back to the question, like I am excited to see a lot of this stuff. And again, I feel like we're going back to a place where again we can present ideas, we can have conversations, we can disagree with each other. I think that's something that was missing from my life previously and going through the experiences I've gone through. And so that is, I think, the most hopeful. But yeah, obviously there's still a lot that needs to actually get done and be done. And it does worry me about, if this Title IX issue comes back in 4 years and they're like, let's actually repeal all of this and bring it back and say, yeah, you can identify, or what New York State did in the Constitution, do that. So.
Yeah. As long as they, here comes the dog. What's up? As long as they,
she wants to be. She wants to be in it.
She wants to be in the shot. You want to come up? I'll move this. Come on. You want to come up?
There we go. She had to make an appearance.
She had to come up. She had to come up here. Come here. Come here. She's such a lap dog. I forgot what I was gonna say.
It's okay. She's distracting.
She's very distracting. No, I do think that there's every reason to be optimistic about what's about to happen for the next 4 years. There's a lot of pressure on Trump. He's made a lot of promises. Let's see if he holds to it. But if he can hold to the core of his promises, then who he anoints is going to have a major advantage moving forward. So if that person is JD Vance, which by the way, I didn't know a lot about JD Vance other than like he's a senator. He had success with his book, talking about his childhood. But he has impressed me, especially.
I was very uncertain too, to be honest, with the pick. But he's been quite impressive.
Yeah. And there's no guarantee that the vice president will get like this great run into becoming the president.
Yeah, no, that's what I mean.
But at least get your name out there.
Oh, yeah.
And especially from a sense where we understand Trump only has 4 years. And if that time is used to uplift JD, put JD in a position where he's giving press conferences more and stuff like that. So if people
Yeah.
see him, kind of like the president, then it
It'll
could it
help
could
his
it could help
his
him out.
yeah. Which I don't know what Joe Biden, I guess, could have tried to do that for Kamala Harris, but
Well, that's a different story. Joe Biden didn't want to be out of office.
yeah, they're fighting each other.
He was pushed
Oh.
out. That man was
Yo, he
pushed
was
out.
pushed out. You know what? And then I'll leave this to the one more thing, but did you see his press conference the other day where he was like completely coherent, talking like in normal stuff? I've never been a conspiracy theorist. There's a lot of quote unquote right wing conspiracy theorists that are thrown around. The
Mhm.
one conspiracy theorist that I will take to the grave, the presidential debate, Biden versus Trump back in June. Somebody definitely mixed up his drug cocktail and made him extra incoherent that day, because there's no way he can go from whatever that appearance was to last week or 2 weeks ago when he's giving a press conference and he's speaking completely coherently. I don't know what happened that day.
So I think it was a couple of things. Without being conspiratorial, I do believe that they give that man uppers.
Oh, they have to. They definitely. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sure
And
a lot of
sometimes
politicians are probably.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not saying he's alone.
No.
And I remember them talking about like after a certain time, he's like incapacitated. So I think it could have easily been in the combination of old age.
Yep.
And listen, we've been watching his press conferences and he's been giving speeches at like the UN and stuff like that. And he looked terrible, but
Yeah.
it wasn't prime time at a debate.
Yeah.
So the reason why like everyone has such a strong reaction is because he's being pressed. And he has to respond to stuff and not just give like these kindergarten press conferences
Mm-hmm.
and take no questions and get rushed off with cue cards and stuff like that. So I don't know. I'm not conspiratorial that someone set him up.
Yeah, I don't push a lot of conspiracy theories, and I
Yeah.
don't have any evidence to back it up. But like,
Yeah.
it just looks suspicious. Is all I'm gonna say.
No, honestly, I do think that if in the beginning they were to say you have your choice, not Donald Trump, Joe Biden or Kamala Harris, they would have went with Joe Biden. And he had the general support of everything.
Yeah.
I heard no rumors of people not really wanting him to run. Although Joe did say he was going to be a placeholder, and I think maybe some people were surprised that he was trying to run again. But at the same time, you were talking about the Republican Party has former Democrats, has young people, has new ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at the Democratic Party, you're seeing that
Celebrities,
they don't really have
college educated white people. Like,
I mean, they've isolated themselves. But as far as like a political leader, someone that you can get behind, like who's going to run in 4
2028.
years? I don't know.
Gavin
Newsom, and I don't know if
Josh
that's
Shapiro. I don't know.
And listen, I'm not even going to say that Gavin couldn't win, but what I'm saying is they're daft of political potential.
Yeah.
It's a small. That's why they chose Tim Walz. Like who else are they going to pick? They didn't know who to pick. Let's just pick this guy. And even right afterwards, they were like, yeah, we think that Tim Walz wasn't a good pick. Like, so yeah, who knows? We're just,
Yeah, but it's exciting. I think part of me though, now that the election's over, I think I sort of have been like, let's just get through the election day, and now it's like regrouping and okay, now what? But I do think there is more hope than before. It was just like, let's get through it, and there was everyone's on the other side. Like I think Oprah came and was like, there's never going to be another election if Trump wins. Did you see that? Am I making that up? Did that actually happen?
I didn't see that. No.
Or maybe it was someone else at one of her Kamala's political
There's
rallies.
a bunch of people who say stupid shit like that.
But that's the thing is like I told somebody that a little bit before the election. I was like, guys, there's gonna be another election. Like, chill out.
Yeah.
We're not gonna like enter a world war and a civil war and all. No, like
no,
just
relax.
Yeah.
That's what I tell you. Get off the internet.
Go
outside, talk to people.
Get on Twitter. Go talk to real people.
Yeah. Go
touch
vote.
grass, as they say.
Touch grass. Yeah. Go vote and do your part. That's what I'm saying. Like, we have basically a year. Like someone says they're going to run for office. We have a year of talking about this nonsense for one vote.
For one vote. For literally you to go
vote.
circle one person's name in a ballot.
And most people already know who that person is going to be, right? So what are we arguing over? You already know. Just go do your one vote. And just
that's actually a good point. Like even like they're during the primaries and they're doing all like the debates, like last year, even like this time last year, we're like doing all these primary debates. I'm like, guys.
I mean, listen.
It's important to do. I'm not suggesting it's not, but it was just funny because I remember it was just notable that Trump was not at any of those debates.
Right.
And it was everybody knew.
Which, by the way, I didn't agree with.
I didn't agree with him skipping them either.
Yeah.
No.
I'm not a Republican, but I do think that if you're seeking to become the nominee,
you should go to the debates.
The American public should at least hear you get challenged.
Yep.
So I get it from a strategic standpoint.
No. Yeah. I don't disagrary with you at all. I think you should have been there. Which maybe I'll go.
At least once. At least one
of them. Yeah. I really, and I thought, for some, honestly, in my heart, I weirdly thought that he would. But that was just funny to me because it was like, you know, all these people on the stage debating and the front runner is just not there. And so it was just like, it was just a really funny process to watch that go down last fall. I think it was November. There was a debate, one in August.
Yeah.
This is like only a year ago. And it's already like the elections happened. And we already know who's going to be inaugurated. You know what I mean? It's just so funny. Yeah, you're right. It's really 1 year of your life.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you so much for coming over.
Of course. Thank you for having me. I know we talked about a lot of random topics, but I think my biggest takeaway from this is that you should start a parenting advice column or something.
Well, actually, I'm writing a book.
About parenting?
Sort of. I'll tell you more about it.
Okay.
Afterwards. But it should be coming out spring 2025.
Okay.
So it talks about parenting and stuff like that.
Well, that's good because I think you have a good perspective on it that a lot of people need to hear that maybe they aren't willing to listen to, but they should hear.
Thank you. I appreciate that. But thank you for coming over and having a meal with me and putting up with my little lush dog.
No, right? She's so cute. I said next time we should just have a belly rub segment for her. Just only her.
But thank you again.
Yes, of course. Thank you so much.